The mystery of the missing human species. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that humans aren't the only humans. Not aliens, not monkeys, humans. People who walk upright, make tools, bury their dead, tell stories, raise children, and stare at the stars wondering what they're doing here. And they're living right next door. Sounds impossible. But for most of human history, that was normal. The strange part isn't that other human species existed. The strange part is that they're gone. All of them, except us. And nobody knows exactly why. If you traveled back far enough, Earth wouldn't look like a planet ruled by one human species. It would look more like a crowded neighborhood. Different kinds of humans lived in different places at the same time. Some were short, some were massive. Some had brains nearly as large as yours. Some survived in environments that would make modern humans miserable. The world wasn't populated by humanity. It was populated by humanities. And that's where the mystery begins. Because if evolution usually creates many branches, why is there only one left? To understand how strange this is, imagine walking through a forest and finding only a single tree. No other species, no cousins, no relatives, just one survivor standing where an entire ecosystem should be. That's us. Humanity isn't the rule. Humanity is the last remaining branch. The evidence began emerging from caves, cliffs, deserts, and riverbeds. A skull here, a jawbone there, a finger bone in a frozen cave. Tiny fragments that completely changed our understanding of ourselves. For centuries, people assumed humans had always been humans. Then the bones started talking. The first shock came when scientists uncovered evidence of a human species that looked familiar and unfamiliar. They were powerfully built, strong enough to survive Ice Age Europe. Their brow ridges were larger. Their bodies were thicker. Their faces were different. Yet if you saw one from a distance, you might not immediately realize they weren't human. Because they were, just not your kind. These were the Neanderthals, and they shattered a comforting idea. We were not unique, at least not historically. But the deeper researchers looked, the stranger things became. Neanderthals weren't alone. Not even close. Another species called Homo floresiensis lived on an island in Indonesia. Adults were barely taller than modern children. The media nicknamed them hobbits. At first, some researchers thought the bones belonged to sick modern humans. Then more evidence appeared. Different anatomy, different proportions, different evolutionary history, an entirely separate human species. Which raised a question. How many more were there? The answer kept growing. Homo erectus, Homo naledi, Homo heidelbergensis, Denisovans, and several others, some known from complete skeletons, others from only a few fragments. Imagine discovering an entire lost civilization from a single fingerprint. That's essentially what happened with the Denisovans. Scientists found a tiny finger bone inside a Siberian cave. Nothing extraordinary, just a fragment. Then DNA analysis revealed something shocking. It didn't belong to a Neanderthal. It didn't belong to a modern human. It belonged to an entirely unknown human species. A whole branch of humanity had existed and vanished, without leaving cities, monuments, or written records. For tens of thousands of years, humans weren't alone. Different human species shared the same planet, sometimes separated by oceans, sometimes separated by only a few miles. And occasionally, they met. Think about that for a moment. A modern human standing face to face with another human species, looking into eyes that were intelligent, curious, aware. Someone who could recognize danger, form relationships, care for family, and communicate. The closest comparison today doesn't exist. There is no second human species left. We've never experienced what our ancestors considered normal. But then, the mystery deepens. Because these species didn't simply disappear before we arrived. Many overlapped with us for thousands of years, which means our ancestors lived in a world containing multiple human species simultaneously. So what happened? Did we fight them? Maybe. Evidence suggests violence existed, but violence alone doesn't solve the mystery. Entire species don't simply vanish because of occasional conflict, especially species that survived hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans appeared. Maybe climate change wiped them out. Again, possible. Ice ages transformed landscapes. Forests became grasslands. Grasslands became frozen wastelands. But climate had changed many times before. Most of these species had already survived dramatic environmental shifts. Something else was happening, and then genetics revealed one of the biggest surprises of all. The missing species aren't entirely gone. They're inside you. When scientists sequenced ancient DNA, they discovered something astonishing. Modern humans and Neanderthals had children together. The same happened with Denisovans. Different human species didn't just coexist, they mixed. Today, millions of people carry Neanderthal DNA. Others carry Denisovan DNA. Tiny pieces of vanished worlds are still walking around inside living bodies. In a sense, extinction wasn't always extinction. Some species disappeared physically, but fragments of them survived genetically. Suddenly, the story changed. The question wasn't simply, why did they die? The question became, where did they go? And the answer might be stranger. Some may have been absorbed. Imagine pouring different colors of paint into one bucket. Eventually, you can no longer separate them. The individual colors disappear, yet they're still present, just transformed. But that still doesn't explain everything, because many human species truly did vanish. Entire branches ended forever, and one species remained. Us. Why us? What made modern humans different? At first, researchers searched for a physical answer, maybe bigger brains. But some extinct humans had brains just as large. Maybe stronger bodies. Not that either. Maybe better tools. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. The answer appears to be something less visible, something hiding inside the mind. The ability to cooperate at enormous scales. Humans can build relationships with people they've never met, trust strangers, share ideas across continents, create myths, laws, religions, nations, and identities that exist only because millions of people agree they exist. A dollar bill is just paper. A country is just land. A corporation is just an idea. Yet humans can organize around invisible concepts, and once that ability emerged, everything changed. A small group connected by shared stories could outperform a larger group connected only by personal relationships. Knowledge spread faster. Innovations spread faster. Survival strategies spread faster. The human species that shared information most effectively gained an enormous advantage, not because individuals were smarter, because networks were smarter. One brain is powerful. 10,000 connected brains are something entirely different, and that may have tipped the balance, not overnight, not through one dramatic battle, but through thousands of tiny advantages accumulating over generations. A better hunting strategy here, a better tool there, a new idea spreading across hundreds of miles. Small edges eventually become history, and history can erase entire branches of a family tree. Yet perhaps the most unsettling discovery is this. We often talk about extinct human species as if they were completely different from us. But the more scientists learn, the blurrier the line becomes. Neanderthals made art, used tools, cared for injured relatives, buried their dead. They weren't monsters. They weren't primitive cavemen. They were people, different people, but people. Which means the mystery isn't why creatures unlike us disappeared. The mystery is why people so much like us disappeared, and why we remained. Imagine standing in a room containing every human species that ever lived. Dozens of faces, different heights, different voices, different bodies, different ways of seeing the world. Then, one by one, they leave. The room grows quieter. Fewer conversations, fewer perspectives, fewer possibilities, until eventually only one remains. You. That is the story of humanity. Not the rise of a species, the narrowing of a family. We often see ourselves as the beginning of something, but in many ways, we're the ending. The final surviving chapter of a story that once contained many authors. And perhaps the strangest part of all is this. When you look in the mirror, you're not just seeing the winner of human evolution. You're looking at the last witness, the lone survivor of a world filled with humans that no longer exist.